Can you imagine breaking up with your girlfriend and then suffering a car accident and then merging with a system of technology that originated in a universe hundreds of billions of light years away, and that from that moment the entire universe began to behave like crazy? Well, for Xiao Luo, our protagonist, it is quite possible. For him, there are two types of people in the world, those who win and those who lose. Unfortunately for him, he is the loser, or well, as he calls himself, a complete failure. Although, to begin with, it is not thanks to that is that he gives his letter of resignation to his ex-girlfriend. And boss, no, not at all. He gives it to her because he has a few personal reasons. He means it's not because of her, but, well, there is a lot of doubt. After handing over his resignation to his former boss, he concentrates on the fact that from that moment on, he was not going to let anyone define him anymore. But of course, that could not be entirely possible while he continued to take his things out of his work and rumors ran at the speed of light. That's where Hua Heifeng comes in, the prince of the Hua group, or well, as rumors call him, the replacement of Xiao by his former boss. When Xiao was introduced to him in the hall surrounded by his bodyguards, Xiao didn't like it one bit. He looked at him up and down with superiority and let his hand stretched out. To be a very personal reason, it was noticeable that Xiao was leaving the office precisely for Hua. What Hua brought out in Xiao's face was much less than he expected, so when people began to pile in at Hua's shouting and teasing towards Xiao for not being intimate with his ex-girlfriend, Xiao didn't miss an opportunity to call him sick for saying that out loud and rejoice about it. Obviously, Hua didn't like that one bit, and while grabbing him by his shirt, Xiao didn't like that either, so he slapped Hua's hand to let go. Once done, it was to be expected that Hua would send him to be beaten by his bodyguards, but what Hua did not expect was that Xiao would respond to the attack. After leaving Hua's first bodyguard on the floor, Hua did not wait to send the other one with everything and nervousness. It cost Xiao nothing to leave him on the floor also with a single blow. Hua, quite nervously, reminded Xiao who he was and why he couldn't touch him. That clearly wasn't enough for Xiao to stop walking towards the prince, so Hua started threatening him, but stopped immediately when Xiao put his fist in his face. Once that was done, leaving Hua on the floor, surprised by her strength, Xiao heard his ex's squeaky voice asking him to just stop with his act, and then claiming him and asking for an explanation of why he hit Hua like that. Our protagonist watched as his ex-girlfriend and ex-boss knelt at Hua's height to see if she was okay. Something that our protagonist did not like one bit, and from there the thought jumped that the whole relationship of 4 years was an unnecessary waste of time. Xiao managed to ask her former boss if she really thought she was in love with her teacher Hua, something he thought was very funny, really. Xiao Menkui, her former boss, demanded to know what lightning she was talking about, to which Xiao let her know that Hua only loved to use her. From there, Xiao finally left the office with his head held high. Once out of the office, our protagonist began to talk to his system and to himself. When the system dialogue body first appeared, and suddenly on the day Xiao suffered his accident, he thought he was hallucinating. And, let's see, that system comes from a parallel land called T168Q, and its purpose of its existence is to cultivate its host, that is, our protagonist, to reach the level of genius, and while doing that, in the course of his adventure, he can change his destiny. Our protagonist did not like the idea almost at all, and less when his system, after detecting it, because yes, that's what he does, but after detecting it he made him see that Xiao was a mediocre person, making him see that to reach the genius level, they had a long way to work. Xiao knew that the system could only change the host's constitution and experience, but for him, that was not so simple. Trusting himself had never been his forte, and he himself knew it perfectly. Now he was sitting on a park bench, out of work, not knowing what to do, while his mother had sent him a message letting him know that Xiao's father was quite sick and needed money for his medicines. He himself knows that a man with no money was not a man at all, so he got up from his bench and started calling people he knew to give him a job while he walked. He didn't have it easy. Every friend who called made it quite clear to him that he should not trust Xiao Menki, particularly an old friend who also asked for a job and asked if there was any way to make money easily. She kept talking to him until a street girl asked him for a few coins, to which he rummaged through his pockets and gave her a few bills and made the girl surprised at his great gesture and let her know that he was a good man. As soon as the girl walked away, Xiao's system showed her a notification telling her that she had to rescue a strange girl and that by completing that task she could earn 300 points. Xiao found that notification very strange, so he began to see on the street who his system was referring to. It didn't take long for him to realize that he was talking about that street girl. When he realized, he chased her a few more blocks, but he didn't realize that whoever he was talking to was still on the phone line. The friend yelled at him over the phone, very annoyed that if he really thought he was a customer service hotline, Xiao almost dropped his cell phone. Xiao managed to calm him down a little so the friend could continue to give him ideas on how to make money fast. None of those ideas served our protagonist, of course. Even so, as he continued to talk to his friend, he continued to walk behind the girl decisively and silently. The girl was not stupid since she felt that someone was following her. Thanks to that, he suddenly turned around, but Xiao managed to quickly hide behind a building. He asked his friend for silence about the call, which he didn't like one bit. Xiao managed to observe the corner of the building the girl and a man who doubled the size of the girl with a giant knife pointing at her. To our protagonist's surprise, the girl handed over the money Xiao gave to the giant man. Apparently, from what Xiao could observe, the giant man did not like what the girl had given him since he could hear how he threatened her with the knife, telling her that he definitely did not appreciate her legs, to which the girl begged her to please not break her legs. Xiao listened as the big man asked the girl to beg him not to break his legs. He also heard how the girl began to cry and how the giant man exploded with anger when he saw that she did not do what he asked. The giant man was tired of listening to her cry like a rabbit all day, every day, so with all his strength he grabbed and shifted his hand on the girl's face. Our protagonist did not like that one bit, but before he reached the height of the giant man, he managed to hear him tell her that if he did not pay he was going to break his legs. Our protagonist managed to get to where the giant man was without many complications and yelled at him to stay away from the girl. The giant man asked very angrily who he was, to which Xiao again replied to stay away from her. The guy got quite upset and threatened Xiao with his giant knife. Xiao didn't impress or care much about his threat and in one fell swoop sent the guy flying. As soon as the giant man hit the wall, the friend Xiao was talking to on the phone demanded that he tell him what was going on, and told him that he would call someone if he didn't hurry to answer him. Xiao completely ignored him and focused on the girl, asking her very tenderly if she was okay. The little girl couldn't take much longer and burst into tears, saying through tears that she missed her mother, her brother, her father, and that she wanted to go home. Xiao very kindly tried to calm her down by telling her that everything was over and that he was going to take her to the police department so that they could take her home. The girl seemed to agree, but still kept crying. Our protagonist finally remembered his friend on the phone and replied that nothing had happened, also informed him that he was going to the police station and let him know that they would talk later. While he hung up, the girl threw herself into the arms of our protagonist, and in order not to separate her from him, he carried her in his arms, thus taking her to the police station. What our protagonist did not realize is that since he crossed paths with the giant man with the knife, someone was watching him from a building, weighing that he was a good man. The next day, Xiao woke up to a loud knock on his door. He reluctantly got up and asked who it was that was knocking on the door. On the other side, an unknown man answered, asking for help. His name was Chu Yongsheng. Xiao seemed to recognize that name and was shocked when he remembered who it was. As he opened his door and let it through, the idea of what the hell the richest man in Jiancheng wanted and why the hell a person with such a bearing would ask him for help. While Chu made himself comfortable in Xiao's living room, our protagonist was fetching water to give him. Once with the water in Chu's hands, Xiao told him that he was only a poor person and did not understand how a man of such a position asked him for help. It all makes sense when Chu expresses that he saw yesterday's incident, and also tells him that he has a good skill in hand-to-hand combat. Xiao seems to doubt, and in his head he begins to think if that man came to see his system, to which he calms down when he analyzes himself, observing that the host is still an ordinary person. That meant that he could neither see nor notice it. Chu told him that he had an opponent who did quite a few things under the table with a gangster recently and was afraid that he was not good to his daughter, so he wanted to ask our protagonist to be his daughter Chu Yu's bodyguard. Xiao let him know that he was not a professional bodyguard, and he also had to be out of society for a long time. Even so, he asked him how much he would give if he accepted his request, to which the old man replied that he would give him 1 million remuneration. Xiao seemed to think about it, and because of the silence that was obtained in the conversation, Chu quickly offered him another 1 million more remuneration to accept, to which Xiao obviously agreed. Hours later, Xiao was regretting accepting that offer when he found himself in a classroom full of pure women. The girls in that class were excited that there was finally a boy there, so they began to say without shame that Xiao was quite handsome and that they were falling in love with him. Without thinking about it anymore, some of those girls went over our protagonist, dropping the classic questions of, "Do you have a boyfriend? You are very handsome. Would you be interested in dating me? I haven't seen a good boy in a long time." There was only one girl who was glued to his seat, looking at that scene with a disgusted face, saying that he was just a pair of stinky leather. When Xiao thought that there was no authority in that room, the teacher's cry was heard, ordering all those girls to return to their seats, to which a student replied that she only wanted to stay with Xiao and that was why she ordered them to sit down. Although the teacher scolded her again, the girl completely ignored her and asked Xiao to find a place to sit with her, plus she could ask her anything she didn't understand after class. Xiao, giving him a rather subtle refusal, in his head thought that this room was a den of wolves, and he wondered why all those university students were so enthusiastic about his arrival. While he was thinking that, he was walking to some free seat when suddenly, the only girl who was sitting in his seat from the beginning, put her foot on him to trip and fall. To the girl's bad luck, Xiao tripped, yes, but in order not to fall, Xiao held on, well, of one of its, breasts. The girl, instead of getting upset, began to think things she shouldn't, making Xiao get up very quickly, hit a pretty loud denial, and apologized to her very nervously. Xiao ran out, sitting last, not expecting any response from the girl. Back then, it can be said that that girl was completely upset, thinking that all the men were a bunch of idiots. After a while, Xiao was able to settle into the class, thinking that the teacher had a rather hypnotic effect as he nodded, falling asleep. Unfortunately for him, the teacher threw a question at her, but since she saw that he did not answer her in time, when she turned she shouted, very annoyed that Xiao had enough guts to fall asleep in his class. Xiao immediately got up, and right there he heard the girl he had had the mishap with say out loud that he was a little more disrespectful to the master. Xiao realized that that evil witch was Yu. In order not to be crushed by the evil witch, Xiao got up from his seat, asking the teacher for forgiveness, claiming that he had just entered that school nothing ago and that it took him a little time to review the homework he had been left because he fell asleep. Xiao threw the tip at Yu, telling her in her face what her most disrespectful side was, and that if she knew, she was more than invited to tell him her answer. With that answer, the girls in her class were surprised, since almost no one had been able to refute Yu. That bothered Yu quite a bit, of course, but he didn't say anything. That answer seemed to be enough for the teacher, so she sent attention to the class and continued with what was taught. On the blackboard he wrote that money was the source of evil and asked for opinions on that prayer. As expected, Yu raised his hand at that moment and let his opinion be known, and that is that he expressed that Shakespeare had said at some point in his life that money has unlimited power to confuse wrong and right, as well as to confuse the world, and that this was the deep root of the rampant spread of crime. He also jumped to express that money could awaken the endless greed of many people, and that to let the beautiful feeling become a commodity was to make people lose consciousness and not realize it. With her opinion quite clear, that is, she thought that money was the root of evil, the class applauded her and some girls surrounded her table to let them know that they agreed with her opinion. What you didn't expect was that Xiao or someone in general might differ with his idea. Xiao had a very different way of thinking, and let it be seen that money did not believe that it was the root of all evils, or well, at least it could not cover all the evils of the entire universe. Xiao's system, seeing that he was about to debate, sent him a notification letting him know that if he needed to cheat there he could use points to exchange all the knowledge about money, to which Xiao replied that he did not need, a little angry. Yu also got up from his seat and blurted out that in 1995 there were 12 people who died and more than 5,000 were injured in the Japan underground gas incident. In the wake of that incident, member Asahara Zhangwang was a cult leader who sold the hair of the wounded for 3,000 yen. After that, he jumped to Wu Sangui, letting the king's soldiers pass because he wanted Chen Yuan and not the US dollar. Yu was quite upset, but she didn't lower her tone one bit when she said that later he had become the king of Yunnan, causing Chen Yuan to be caught later. He asked him why he became emperor besides money. Xiao did not remain silent and threw one last question at him, according to him. The question was that before money was invented, what was the source of all kinds of bestiality and greed in the world? Thanks to that question, the girls around Yu's table said that he was very mean to Yu and to stop flirting with her. Yu had no answer at all, so Xiao kept talking, letting it be known that human greed in the heart is the true source of all evils in the world. Right there the bell rang, and it was when the teacher ended the class, commenting that the debate had been quite interesting and that you could learn from it in your free time. Just as Yu was leaving the classroom, one of her classmates grabbed her by the arm, letting her know that Xiao didn't want to leave her wrong in class and if she could forgive him, to which Yu firmly answered a resounding no and left the classroom. As she walked through the halls, she began to think that if Xiao was her father's bodyguard, even though he made her look very bad in class, she was never going to stay that way. After a while, Yu was in a part of her school talking on the phone with someone, saying that she wanted to teach Xiao a lesson that night so that he would not be more arrogant in front of her, but not hurt him. The person on the other end of the phone line demanded that he know why he couldn't hurt Xiao by calling him stinky, and that if he passed away no one would really care. Yu replied, very annoyed, that if she said something else about knights and inferior human beings she was going to take him away from her and hang up her cell phone, which, after a few shouts, she did. Fu Jiawei is called the boy Yu was talking to. That boy was in his bed quite stubborn when he didn't hear Yu talking on the cell phone. He was telling Yu his moon princess and had become quite upset to hear Yu complain about the new boy. While Jiawei was in bed with a picture of her rather large princess hanging on her wall, she talked about never letting Yu go and hurting Xiao in not quite nice ways. On the other side, Xiao was quietly sitting in his other class, but since he hadn't started yet, he was reading something from his bag. He was doing that until someone stood in front of him and called him by name, to which Xiao looked up. She was a girl from her previous class, a girl who wanted to throw him a welcome party that same night. Xiao's face broke down, and as he tried to say that it was not at all necessary for her to do that, he thought that if the girl had really self-medicated badly. The girl didn't care what Xiao was trying to tell her, and told her that the party was at 6 o'clock in the afternoon before leaving. Although, before disappearing completely, Yu appeared from beyond saying that he was going to be waiting for the party to start right at the door of the university, looked at Xiao and basically ordered him to go by saying Xiao bodyguard, to which Xiao thought that if she really knows who he is or was just trying it out. Hours passed and 6 o'clock was done. Xiao was waiting for Yu and the girl in his class outside the college, but no one came. He was already getting impatient when he looked again on his watch at 6:30. He was about to leave when the teacher in his first class and a girl came towards him. The girl asked him who he was waiting for while the teacher told him that all three were going to play, to which he replied if he did not need more people. They both ignored him and started playing. On the other hand, Yu was more than happy making Xiao wait, thinking that he was quite upset because he had had to wait for her for almost an hour. Although Xiao was in other plans, Yu was planning what he was going to say when it was his turn to see his bodyguard, and he was just saying it when he ran into, well, with no one. As upset as she was, she took out her cell phone and went to the dean's office of the university to get Xiao's number, although she got nothing. Xiao arrived 2 hours later with the teacher and the girl from before. When he started walking away from them, they both yelled at him to teach them how to play LOL the next time he played, to which he replied that he was more than perfect. Yu was like a soul carrying the devil when he saw him coming, as expected. So upset was she that when Xiao got to her position, what she yelled at her was to get in the car, to which he replied that he had lost 30 minutes of his precious time, but Yu, annoyed, replied that choosing clothes and makeup needed a lot of time. Once in the car, they started fighting even more until they arrived at the scene. When they got off the car, Jiawei greeted them with a smile and a glass of wine in his hand. He told Yu that he and the guests had been made to wait, to which she responded with a chuck and introduced Xiao, saying that he was the new classmate and was the main character of the party. He added without thinking that his attitude was a bit rude, but he wanted them to get along with him. Jiawei agreed and went on to strike up a conversation with Xiao. He saw him quite tense standing in a corner, so he ordered him to sit down so that he would not stand there. Xiao replied that it was okay, so he accepted the offer. On the other hand, when Jiawei left Xiao alone to settle into the party, she left with Yu to leave her with her friends Shulan and Yingying. They were beyond excited to receive her, and when they finished greeting them, Shulan told her that Jiawei had a dog too scary and that she and Yingying were super scared. Shulan let her know that Yu had to help her release the angry dog. Yu with a smile told Jiawei to go and take out the angry dog that had scared his friends to let him see how ugly the dog was, to which he replied that it was perfect. Jiawei snapped his fingers, and without expecting much, the terrifying dog appeared. Jiawei put a chain on him and took him to the center of the party. People began to get scared because of the powerful barking of that dog, and the only one who dared to say something to Jiawei was Xiao. He ordered her to take him out as he was a very fierce dog that could hurt people. Yu appeared giving him a good slap to push him and call him a coward to the four winds. He demanded that he get out of the way and let her know that the dog didn't scare anything. That dog continued barking and barking until it began to move from one side to another, and when the time came, it broke loose from the chain, causing it to break. The first thing the dog did when he saw that he was free was to jump to Yu. If it weren't for Xiao standing in front of Yu to protect her and punch the dog, well, Yu might have had a cute dog bite on her face. The terrifying dog, after receiving the punch, was quite angry, but when he saw Xiao's face, let's say that his anger was lowered and he went to scream with his owner, giving him a great blow in his stomach. Jiawei was out of the air thanks to the dog's blow and asked Yu with great effort to help him get up from the ground where he was. Yu, on the other hand, was quite petrified in the same place where Xiao had pushed her away from the dog. The scene looks quite messy thanks to the chaos, and since Yu couldn't get up, her friends helped her sit in a chair. Once that was done, they started asking him if he was okay, if he needed his personal doctor. Because yes, he has one too, and asking him if he wanted a big glass of water. Yu replied that she was more than perfect and told her friend, the blonde, to go ahead with the plan. Because, well, obviously it was Yu's planned revenge, and whoever hasn't realized at this point. Christ, a lot of things were going on in the blonde's head, but as a good friend she decided not to say them and continue with the plan. Although Xiao was not aware, and as a good person, he thought that Yu had a panic attack and told him that it was better for them both to go to rest. Yu's blonde friend quickly told her no, to stop fooling around as Yu was perfectly well, and besides, she had Yingying taking care of her. She invited him to play anything else he wanted, and that seemed to please Xiao, so he agreed. Xiao observed that there was a pool table, and when the blonde invited him to take a look, he did not refuse the offer. People began to cower as they both walked to the pool table, excited that Xiao wanted to play. Shulan, who is the blonde, asked a blonde partner for his pool stick, to which the blonde replied that it was fine. Shulan began to seduce Xian, asking him if he had ever played pool at any time in his life, and that, since he was a handsome boy, the answer was obvious, although our protagonist replied that he had only played almost no pool in his existence. The blonde didn't like the answer, but still told her that as long as she managed to get a ball in, she could get 5,000 yuan from a card she had in her hand. Our protagonist liked the bet, but told Shulin that if he lost he didn't have enough money to make up for his uselessness. The blonde let him know that there was no problem, but mentioned that if he lost, all he had to do was bark like a dog in front of all his schoolmates. Xiao accepted the bet and asked Shulin if she would like to start first. People around started muttering that he was honestly pretty crazy given that the blonde was apparently too good at billiards, but what those people didn't even count on was that Xiao had the system on her side. Without thinking twice, our protagonist asked the system if there was any pool ability to exchange for points, and although the system showed him a notification that there was such an ability and he tried to change it, he didn't think he would be only 5 points short of that ability. He needed 700 points to get the skill and only had 695. Our protagonist's soul fell at his feet, but he could not say anything more since the blonde was asking for his attention, making him a rather arrogant demonstration of how billiards was played. The people around began to support the blonde, and telling Xiao to kneel before her since she had just lost like a fool. Once the ball reached the hole, the blonde got up and told Xiao again that this was just a demonstration, that he should go first. Xiao accepted that he couldn't use his ability to be on par with Shulin, so he started to make a fool of himself. The crowd began to notice that he did not even know how to hold the pool stick, so they began to yell at him to do himself a favor and to surrender quickly, because if he does not know how to hold the stick, less he would be able to with the blonde. Even the blonde thought Xiao was too stupid for his own good. No one thought I would be able to play well until he hit the white ball and all the other balls fell on every hole. The crowd was left with their mouths open and began to cheer him up. It happened that if the boy made 20 people violently excited, he could get 33 points, and thus be able to complete for his pool ability. Once that was done, the system asked him if he wanted to acquire the skill of billiards once and for all, to which he finally accepted. The system made the change and reminded him that he had only 28 points remaining, to please remember to earn more points. The blonde told him with some feigned happiness that she didn't expect him to be very good, and if she kept going to lose another 50,000 yuan for him. Xiao laughed and told him if he could put all the balls in the game on the card at once. Actually, he told her that jokingly, but what he did tell her seriously was that if he could clean the entire table, the blonde could double the amount of what he earned. The blonde seemed to be interested, but still asked him what he would give if he lost, to which he replied that he would be at his disposal. People were surprised to hear their safety, and they said things that YouTube wouldn't let me say. Jumping out of that, they both started the game. The first to start was Xiao, and he managed to get every ball he touched. The blonde's shocked face was incredibly satisfying to him. That and people's disbelief was even better. Our protagonist reminded the blonde of the bet when he heard her excitement when he saw that he had almost cleaned the table. The face of excitement of the blonde did not last long to see that our protagonist basically left the table more than clean. Xiao told Shulin to remember to keep the card with enough money so that he could spend it for her without worries. The blonde watched him walk away with her mouth open, until she saw that he moved far enough away to tell him that he was going to regret leaving her like this. When Xiao returned to Yu's side to check on him, he met someone who never thought he would meet again, and he just arrived when Jiawei was about to introduce his friend. Hua Heifeng. Our protagonist's head was spinning quite a bit. He didn't understand how Hua could be there in that social circle, but Xiao didn't know that if he stayed there his identity as Yu's bodyguard would be more than exposed. Because of that, he ran and hid from everyone. On the other hand, Jiawei was more than happy to introduce Hua to his Princess Yu, but even she was quite annoyed to engage in any conversation with him. It was so bored that he asked Ying Ying for the location of his bodyguard. Ying Ying was quite puzzled not knowing where she was, but became even more puzzled to see Xiao hit Hua on the head, apparently for no reason. Hua was the only one who found this unusual change of Xiao interesting, but Jiawei not much. He told Xiao that he didn't care what his purpose was for beating him, but he wasn't going to let it again. Jiawei sent his security team to go for our protagonist, but he stopped them instead, saying that he was more than happy to go on his own, although before going, Jiawei told Ying Ying that she had forgotten something, to which she began to observe herself and perceived that she was missing her expensive necklace that she wore at the beginning of the party. He asked Jiawei to help him find it, and he agreed. Yu understood that it was that they had both planned a plan C in case things didn't go their way, which Yu didn't like one bit and thought Jiawei had gone too far. Jiawei ordered that from that moment everyone would look for Ying Ying's necklace. Jiawei's security team began to grope Xiao and told him that he had to cooperate with that search by taking off his clothes, to which he did not give them the pleasure and without much movement managed, in addition to freeing himself from security, to leave several on the ground. Once free, he finally seemed to realize what Yu was up to and asked him if that was his trick to get revenge for what happened in class. Unfortunately, he failed to hear what Yu was saying as an urgent system notification jumped in his face. The task was that he had to track down a mysterious shadow. His reward was going to be 300 points, but if he failed he was going to reduce another 300 points. If we didn't have them, the system was going to eliminate a random ability from our protagonist. Without much thought, Xiao ran out of the party and set out to follow the mysterious spot. From how fast that guy ran, Xiao knew that if he suffered any carelessness, he would lose sight of him and could not afford that. Both kept running through the gloom of the night until the mysterious guy stopped in his tracks when he saw the people guarding the place. Xiao stopped a couple of meters away from him, but 15 minutes later the guy jumped from where he was and without thinking, took out a gun he had hidden and prepared to attack the guards. He couldn't shoot them thanks to Xiao being able to make them dodge the bullets, although that gave the mysterious guy some time to get out of there and go towards Yu, who was his main target. Xiao's cell phone rang and he was warned what he already thought. They let her know that the mysterious guy was after Yu and that she was in danger. One expected Xiao to move at full speed to get to Yu in time, but all he did was stretch out and start walking leisurely. Moving on to Yu, she was still at the party, only now in a room alone, while stretching. She didn't expect Xiao to be as interesting as he already was, so she thought of a way to make the relationship easier. Until at the last moment he changed his mind. When he was about to turn over, the mysterious guy managed to catch her from his back, and while his mouth was covered, Xiao arrived. He managed to give the guy a good kick, making him manage to get away from Yu. When the mysterious guy recognized him, he quickly left the room. Xiao began to think that something was wrong with the people around Yu since it was impossible for the guy to guess exactly when Yu was alone so accurately, but he stopped thinking about as soon as he watched Yu faint. Moments later we have Xiao threatening a Yu watchman, asking him who he was, to which he replies that he was his colleague. Xiao, after leaving him, asked him to take Yu home and tell Mr. Chu everything since he was sure that the person chasing Yu was someone close to her. 3 hours later almost everyone had left the party and the only ones left were Hua, Jiawei and Ying Ying. She was in Jiawei's room quite asleep, while Hua and Jiawei chatted naked that Xiao was the person who had beaten Hua. Hua told Jiawei that Xiao was like this because he had slept with his ex-girlfriend and ex-boss. That topic didn't matter much since Hua wanted to get closer to Hua, but Xiao was the one who stood in her way. They both agreed to finish it, so they moved on to a topic a little more interesting to them. The only thing I can say here is that the two of them got pretty drunk with Ying Ying and ended up taking her to her guest room to do little things. The funny fact was that Ying Ying vomited everywhere and Hua and Jiawei had to clean up all that. The next day, as Xiao walked to his classroom, he heard a voice that he really didn't want to hear. When he entered the hall, he saw Hua Hai talking to Yu about an invitation to a concert the following week. Xiao didn't like the scene at all, and he liked it less when Hua greeted him and told him that when he lost his girlfriend he went to a girls' school to hide from him. The girls who were surrounding the boys started muttering things, but there was one who came out of nowhere to tell him the true story of what happened to Xiao's girlfriend, and asked if they were close friends. Xiao ignored her while thinking that her identity could not be revealed by that stupid man, so without thinking, she rushed to beat him. Hua, to be quite silly, commented to him that if Xiao wanted to fight him, he had to fight his bodyguard first. Xiao didn't care, but as soon as he was going to give the first blow, Hua's bodyguard stopped him completely. Our protagonist found the internal power of Hua's bodyguard quite interesting since, well, it was expected that the bodyguard had some power to stop Xiao. The bodyguard yelled at Xiao that he was going to crush his dog head, but he couldn't do much as his inner power exploded easily. Understanding that Xiao was going to make it very difficult to overcome, so he knocked Hua out to fly out, yes, literally flying out of that classroom window. Xiao may not have been surprised to see that guy flying to a window, but Yu was surprised. Xiao told her that it was just martial arts, making her look silly once again in class, which Yu and her classmates didn't believe one bit. Xiao ignored them and sat in his usual place. He demanded that his system tell him what a light on the bodyguard's arm meant, and his system replied that it was a skill called martial arts called Kai. To have that ability, Xiao had to complete an advanced mission to exchange the necessary points for that ability. Xiao became interested, so it was expected that he would ask the system how to open this advanced mission. The system, very cool, put a meme and told him that he needed to be patient to carry out that mission since he had to complete one at a time. Xiao didn't like his answer, so he told him that his expression system was disgusting. A week later, Xiao was in the stadium of the university, scoring goals in a game when the girls around him went on him praising him. While on the other hand, little Yu was sitting in the stands, weighing on whom the hell was the one who had saved her the night where she was almost kidnapped. She stopped thinking about when a friend startled her by telling her if she liked Xiao because of the way she looked at him while the friend touched her melons. He got rid of her by demanding that she stop talking stupid things because how she can like a forced criminal and a sex maniac. While saying that, a blonde boy heard that and went to where Xiao was asking him to compete in a game. The boy's name was Penfei and he asked Xiao for help to see if he could be a doorman, which I think is a very basic way to make a fool of himself. Penfei thanked Xiao for wanting to accept his challenge, and then, after settling in, shouted that it was a pleasure for him to make him lose. The boys around him began to murmur that if the kick Penfei had given to the ball wasn't the one that had broken a person's leg, he did nothing. The girls started yelling at Penfei to stop at once, but it was too late. When the ball was almost in Xiao's face, Yu shouted her name very worriedly. Not at all, because Xiao stopped the ball without much effort. The crowd around went crazy with admiration for Xiao, leaving Penfei as stupid. Xiao, as any smart person would do, didn't stick with it, so he gave Penfei a pass triple hard and fast. Unfortunately for Xiao, he let the ball pass over Penfei's side, but before Penfei fainted or stained his pants, he warned him just as the ball broke the net of the goal that he was not going to hold back next time. Before anyone said anything, a pretty big blimp in the sky that had an announcement on it. He announced that national artist Su Lai would do a concert in the city. The next thing to know, everyone is at Su Lai's concert shouting his name with flashlights and quite a bit of excitement. While Su Lai sang, the crowd shouted his name quite furiously, but not everything was so pretty. Hua was acting really suspicious, and yes, he was also at the concert, so Xiao just had to follow him to the back of the stadium. Hua was talking to someone and from what Xiao could hear, they were thinking about kidnapping Yu. Again, after Su Lai's concert, in the next chapter he shows us two people walking towards a car, and as soon as the two got on, another guy appeared calling a taxi, explicitly asking him to follow the business car. 15 minutes later Xiao gets out of the taxi, because apparently he was the mysterious guy, and the two people who were in the business car were none other than Jiawei and Yu. Xiao lamented that she was so stupid not to be at the concert, and from what she could hear from Jiawei was that Yu's agent had personally asked him to take her to his hotel so she could rest. Xiao wasted no time, and as soon as they both entered the hotel, Xiao also passed by, but stopping with nonsense he asked the receptionist who was there in which room were the two fools who had entered almost nothing while depositing a fairly large wad of cash. The receptionist made herself beg, commenting that she would never divulge such information about the client who was staying in room 1502. Our protagonist gave him a smile and flew out of the place towards the nearest elevator. I would have honestly taken the stairs because it was getting there faster, but once arrived at the floor in the destined room, our protagonist heard screams for help. He didn't think much and kicked the door down. The image that was found was not pretty, and that is that in bed Hua was basically naked and only covered by a sheet from the waist down, and to Xiao's mortification, Yu was on the bed tied. Xiao was going to start the blows when Jiawei, lying on the floor thanks to him being behind the door when Xiao threw her down, asked to wait, to observe and to understand that, despite not having yet started the threesome they had in mind, the girl was not Yu, it was Su Lai, and that even if she was tied up, drunk, and drugged, it didn't matter, she wasn't Yu. As soon as the word drugged came out of Jiawei's mouth, Xiao became quite violent. I add that the private parts of both were badly damaged here, and that after that beating, Xiao went home, carrying the female star on his shoulders. When he got home, he put Su Lai on his bed, made himself tea, and regretted thinking that Su Lai was Yu. He lamented, a lot, too much. He could not send Su Lai to the hospital because of the drug that those two fools had given him, since it would cause a very bad impact on his career as an actress and singer. So he got down to work and began to find out on the internet from his laptop what he should give to the star. She read that if Su Lai was drugged with different narcotics, she should give her water, make her do vigorous exercises, then the effect might automatically disappear. He stopped researching to prepare some sleeping pills if he got up badly, and that if that did not work, he would drag her to the bathroom to take a cold shower, but when he entered the room to leave things. Let's say you were surprised, and of course, who wouldn't be surprised to find a superstar in a short dress, sweating and saying she was very hot? I mean, it's obvious. Xiao swallowed dry to think that she really was very beautiful and that she considered herself a pretty stupid guy for having such beauty in bed and giving her a sleeping pill, which made me quite laugh.